My name is Jake Lawson, but everyone calls me Jay. I guess it's a bit cooler than Jake, and I don't mind it. Life used to be perfect. I married Emily right after college. She was everything I ever wanted: smart, beautiful, and ambitious. We had twin daughters, Lily and Grace, who were the light of my life. We moved to a small town in Pennsylvania, where I started a surveying business with my best friend, Mark. We called it Lawson and Fuller Surveying. Mark and I had known each other since high school, and partnering with him felt like a natural extension of our friendship. Our business wasn't a gold mine, but it kept us comfortable and happy. We did small jobs, mainly for real estate agents in the area, and the work was steady. Emily was a stay-at-home mom until the girls were in middle school. Then she decided to re-enter the workforce. She landed a job at Mitchell Enterprises, a local company that designed and manufactured sports equipment. It seemed perfect, pay was great, hours were good, and it was close to home. For the first couple of years, things were great. Emily loved her job, and the girls were thriving. We spent weekends at our family cabin, a little bungalow nestled in the woods of Shill County. Those days were filled with laughter, hiking, and family barbecues. Every Friday night was pizza night, and we'd all gather in the living room to watch movies together. Life felt almost idyllic, but things started to change. Emily was promoted to the marketing department, where she worked under a guy named Trevor Wills. Trevor was a former football star, tall, muscular, and charismatic. Emily often talked about him at dinner, how he was a brilliant marketer, how everyone admired him. At first, I thought nothing of it. I mean, who wouldn't admire a successful, charming guy? As time passed, Emily started working late more often. She'd come home tired and distracted, and our conversations became increasingly superficial. I noticed she was spending less time with Lily and Grace. Weekends at the cabin became less frequent, and our family tradition slowly eroded. One evening, while clearing the dinner table, Emily mentioned that she had to go on a business trip with Trevor. It was for a big conference, and she'd be gone for a week. I felt a twinge of unease, but pushed it aside. This was her career, and I wanted to support her. The week Emily was away was tough. The girls missed their mom, and I found myself struggling to keep up with everything. When Emily returned, she was different. There was a new distance between us, an invisible wall that I couldn't seem to penetrate. She talked about Trevor even more, and I started to sense that her admiration for him went beyond professional respect. One night, while lying in bed, I asked her if everything was okay. She sighed and rolled over to face me, her eyes reflecting a mix of frustration and something else I couldn't quite place. "Janie, I'm just tired. Work has been intense, and I need you to trust me. Can you do that?" Her words stung. "Of course, am I. I trust you," I replied, but deep down, a seed of doubt had been planted. The weeks after Emily's return from the conference were strained. She started working late more often, and her weekends became occupied with work commitments that seemed to always involve Trevor. The girls noticed the change too. Lily and Grace, once so close to their mother, began to drift away, preferring the company of their friends or burying themselves in schoolwork. I tried to keep things normal for the girls, taking over pizza nights, movie nights, and even tried to make our cabin trips a solo adventure, but it wasn't the same. The absence of Emily's laughter and her touch made everything feel hollow. One evening, I decided to surprise Emily at work with dinner from her favorite restaurant. I thought it might help us reconnect, remind her of what we had. I walked into Mitchell Enterprises and was greeted by a receptionist who looked at me suspiciously. "Can I help you?" she asked. "Yes, I'm here to see Emily Lawson." "I brought her dinner," I said, holding up the takeout bag with a hopeful smile. The receptionist's face softened slightly. "She's in a meeting right now, but you can wait in the lobby." I sat down, my heart pounding as I waited. I saw Trevor walk by. He was every bit the charming figure Emily described, but there was something about his smug demeanor that set my teeth on edge. He glanced at me, his eyes narrowing for a moment before he continued down the hall. After what felt like an eternity, Emily finally appeared. She looked surprised and a bit annoyed to see me. "What are you doing here?" she asked, forcing a smile. "I brought you dinner. Thought we could eat together," I said, holding up the bag. She hesitated, glancing back down the hall. "I'm really busy tonight, Jay. Can we do this another time?" The disappointment must have shown on my face because she sighed and stepped closer, lowering her voice. It's just a lot of pressure right now with this new campaign. I promise we'll have dinner at home tomorrow, okay? I nodded, feeling like a fool. Sure, and tomorrow? But tomorrow came and went, and we never had that dinner. Emily's late nights turned into overnight trips, and I started to suspect the worst. One night, I decided to confront her. Is there something you're not telling me? I asked as we sat in bed, the silence between us growing unbearable. She sighed, looking more irritated than guilty. Jay, I told you work is just demanding right now. You need to trust me, she said. Trust you? I repeated, my voice rising. How can I trust you when you're never home, when you spend all your time with Trevor? Her eyes flashed with anger. This again? Trevor is my colleague, nothing more. I'm doing this for our family, Che. Why can't you see that? I wanted to believe her, but the doubt nodded at me. I decided to follow her one night, driven by a need to know the truth. I felt like a character in one of those suspense novels, sneaking around and watching from the shadows. I saw her with Trevor, not a meeting or a conference, but at a cozy restaurant. Their heads were closed together, laughing and touching in ways that were far from professional. My heart sank, and a wave of anger at betrayal washed over me. I didn't confront her that night. Instead, I went home feeling more alone than ever. The next morning, I couldn't hide my hurt any longer. Emily, I saw you with Trevor last night, I said, my voice trembling with emotion. She froze, her eyes wide with shock. I can explain, she started, but I interrupted her. Don't bother. I think I've heard enough. The walls of our life together were crumbling, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. The woman I loved was slipping away, and I was powerless to hold on to her. New Year's Eve was supposed to be a night of celebration, a time to look forward to the future. Instead, it turned into a nightmare that shattered whatever remained of my hope. Emily insisted we attend the annual Mitchell Enterprises New Year's Eve party. It's important for my career, of course, she said, her tone leaving no room for argument. Reluctantly, I agreed, wanting to support her, even though every fiber of my being screamed against it. When we arrived at the lavish hotel ballroom, the atmosphere was festive. Glittering decorations adorned every surface, and a live band played upbeat tunes. Emily looked stunning in a sleek black dress, while I felt out of place in my best suit. Happy New Year, Jake. Trevor's booming voice greeted us at the entrance. He was in a tuxedo, exuding confidence and charm. He kissed Emily on the cheek, and I clenched my jaw, trying to keep my cool. Thanks for coming, Fror, he said, shaking my hand with a firm grip that felt more like a challenge than a greeting. Emily's told me a lot about you. I forced a smile. All good, I hope, Trevor laughed. Of course, as the night wore on, I found myself increasingly isolated. Emily was always by Trevor's side, laughing at his jokes, touching his arm, and dancing with him. I was left to mingle awkwardly with people I barely knew, trying to endure the pitying looks from some and the smirks from others. By midnight, I had had enough. I stood at the edge of the dance floor, nursing a beer and feeling more alone than ever. Then it happened, right there in front of everyone. Trevor pulled Emily into a kiss, long, deep, and passionate. My vision blurred with rage. I surged across the room, shoving people aside. What the hell are you doing? I shouted, grabbing Trevor's shoulder and yanking him away from Emily. The room fell silent, and all eyes turned to us. Emily looked horrified, and Trevor's expression turned smug. Calm down, Jake, he said, his voice dripping with condescension. It's just a bit of fun. Fun? I spat. Before I could think, my fist connected with Trevor's jaw. Pain shot up my arm, but I didn't care. Trevor staggered back, clutching his face, and chaos erupted. Someone called for security, and Emily rushed to Trevor's side, glaring at me with a mix of anger and disappointment. Jake, stop it, she screamed. I was pulled away by two burly security guards, but not before I saw the look of disgust on my daughter's faces. Lily and Grace stood at the edge of the crowd, their eyes wide with shock and embarrassment. The guards dragged me outside, and I was left alone in the cold night. The sounds of the party continued without me. My heart pounded in my chest, not just from the physical exertion, but from the realization that I had just publicly destroyed whatever remained of my family. When I got home, I sat in the dark living room, replaying the night's events over and over in my mind. Emily and the girls didn't come home until the early hours of the morning. They walked in looking tired and angry. "Jake, we need to talk," Emily said, her voice cold and detached. I nodded, unable to meet her eyes. "Yeah, I guess we do." She sat across from me, and the girls went upstairs without a word. "I can't believe you did that," Emily said. "You've humiliated me. You've humiliated our family." "Me?" I shot back. "What about you and Trevor? You have any idea how that made me feel?" She sighed, rubbing her temples. "This isn't about feelings anymore, Jake. It's about respect. And tonight, you showed none." I laughed bitterly. "Respect? What about the respect you've shown me by carrying on right under my nose?" Emily looked at me with a mixture of sadness and resignation. "Maybe this isn't working anymore, Jake. Maybe it's time we face the truth." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. "What are you saying?" I asked, stunned. "I'm saying I want a separation," she replied quietly. "For the sake of the girls, for our own sanity, we need to take a step back." The room spun, and I felt like I was drowning. "Emily, please," I begged. But her mind was made up. "I'm sorry, Jake. This is the best way forward," she said as she stood and left the room, leaving me alone with the crushing weight of her decision. My perfect life was officially in ruins, and there was nothing I could do to fix it. After that disastrous New Year's Eve, Emily and I officially separated. She moved into a townhouse closer to her work with the girls, leaving our home filled with an eerie silence. The emptiness echoed through the halls, and I felt more alone than ever. The memories of happier times seemed to taunt me at every turn. With Emily and the girls gone, I focused on my work, but even that couldn't fill the void. My mind kept replaying the events that led to our downfall. The betrayal, the humiliation, the loss. Each day felt like a struggle to keep moving forward. Mark, my business partner and best friend, noticed the change in me. He tried to cheer me up, inviting me out for drinks, but I wasn't in the mood for socializing. One evening, he stopped by my house with a six-pack of beer and a concerned look on his face. "Jake, you can't go on like this," he said, handing me a beer. "You need to get out of this house. It's killing you." I took a sip, nodding. "I know, Mark. I just don't know what to do." "How about the cabin?" he suggested. "Spend some time up there, clear your head. You always said the woods were your sanctuary." The idea had merit. Our family cabin in Shell County had always been a place of peace for me, a retreat from the world. "Maybe you're right," I said. "I could use some time away." The next day, I packed up my things and drove to the cabin. The drive through the winding roads and dense forests was therapeutic, and as I approached the familiar sight of the cabin nestled among the trees, a sense of calm washed over me. The first few days were hard. The silence was almost deafening, and I found myself constantly checking my phone for messages from Emily or the girls that never came. But gradually, I began to settle into the solitude. The routine of chopping wood, cooking simple meals, and walking in the woods gave me a sense of purpose. One crisp morning, I decided to go for a long hike. The air was cool and refreshing, and the forest was alive with the sounds of nature. As I walked along an old trail, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't experienced in months. On my way back, I heard a rustling in the bushes. I turned to see a woman emerge from the trees. She was tall and slender, with long dark hair tied back in a ponytail. She wore jeans and a flannel shirt and carried a crossbow slung over her shoulder. "Hello," she said, her voice carrying a faint accent I couldn't place. "I didn't expect to see anyone else out here." "Hi," I replied, a bit taken aback. "I'm Jake. I have a cabin nearby." "I'm CLA," she said with a smile. "I'm staying at a lodge about a mile from here, just out for a bit of target practice." We fell into an easy conversation, and I found myself intrigued by her. Claire was unlike anyone I'd ever met. She was confident, independent, and had a dry sense of humor that made me laugh for the first time in weeks. "Would you like some coffee?" I offered, pointing back toward the cabin. I was just heading back, and I could use some company. She hesitated for a moment, then nodded. Sure, why not? Back at the cabin, I brewed a pot of coffee, and we sat on the porch, talking and sipping our drinks. Claire told me about her love for archery and the adventures she'd had traveling the world. I found myself opening up to her, sharing my own story, including the painful details of my failed marriage. That sounds tough, she said softly. But you seem like a good man, Jake. You didn't deserve that. Her words were comforting, and for the first time, I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe there was a way forward after all. Claire and I spent the rest of the day together, and as the sun set, I realized I didn't want her to leave. Stay for dinner, I asked, almost shyly. She smiled. I'd like that. We cooked a simple meal together, and as we sat down to eat, I felt the warmth I hadn't felt in a long time. Claire's presence was like a balm for my wounded soul, and I was grateful for her company. Over the next few weeks, Claire and I grew closer. She would visit the cabin almost daily, and we'd spend hours talking, hiking, and practicing archery. She was a skilled archer and even taught me a few things about using a crossbow. One evening, as we sat by the fire, I looked at Claire and realized how much she had come to mean to me. Ciel, I don't know what I would have done if I hadn't met you, I said, my voice filled with emotion. She reached over and took my hand. I feel the same way, Jake. You've given me something to look forward to every day. Our relationship blossomed, and the cabin became our sanctuary. With Claire by my side, I began to heal. The pain of Emily's betrayal still lingered, but it no longer consumed me. I had found something new, something beautiful, and I was ready to embrace it. As winter turned to spring, I knew that my time in isolation had come to an end. It was time to face the world again, but this time, I wouldn't be facing it alone. Claire and I packed up our things and left the cabin, ready to start a new chapter together. Spring had finally arrived, bringing new life to the forest around our cabin. Claire and I had fallen into a comfortable routine, and the bond between us grew stronger with each passing day. I felt like I had found a new purpose, a new direction, and most importantly, a new love. One sunny afternoon, as Claire and I returned from a long hike, we heard the distant hum of an engine. As we reached the cabin, a familiar truck pulled into the driveway. It was Mark, my old business partner and friend. Jake, it's good to see you, man, Mark called out as he stepped out of the truck, his face breaking into a wide grin. Mark, what brings you all the way up here? I asked, surprised but genuinely pleased to see him. Mark's eyes flickered towards Claire, and I could see the curiosity in his gaze. I thought I'd check in on you, see how you're doing, and it seems I've met your lovely companion. CLA extended her hand with a warm smile. Hi, I'm CLA. It's nice to meet you. Nice to meet you too, CLA, Mark replied, shaking her hand. Jax told me a lot about this place, but he never mentioned meeting someone special out here. Well, it's been quite the journey, I said, leading them both to the porch. Let's sit and catch up over coffee. Mark filled me in on the latest news from town. The surveying business was doing well, and he had taken on a few new employees to help with the increased workload. Emily, he mentioned, had settled into her new life with the girls. Though we both avoided the topic of Trevor, it was clear that Mark had heard the rumors. So, what's next for you, Jake? Mark asked, leaning back in his chair. Are you planning to stay out here indefinitely? I glanced at CLA, who gave me an encouraging nod. Actually, Claire and I have been talking about moving back closer to town, maybe even starting something new together. Mark's eyes widened in surprise and approval. That's great to hear. If you need any help, you know where to find me. After Mark left, Claire and I sat on the porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon. Do you really want to move back? She asked softly, her hands slipping into mine. I think so, I replied, squeezing her hand gently. But only if you're with me. CLA smiled, her eyes shining with emotion. Of course, I'm with you, Jake. Wherever we go, we'll go together. With that decision made, we began to plan our move back to town. It wasn't easy leaving the cabin, our sanctuary, but we both knew it was time. We packed up our belongings, loaded them into the truck, and drove back to a life that, for the first time in months, felt full of promise. Our return to town was met with mixed reactions. Some people were surprised to see me back, others curious about CLA. Emily's reaction was the hardest to gauge. She looked surprised when she saw me at the local grocery store and even more so when she saw Claire by my side. "Jake," Emily said, approaching us with a tentative smile. "I didn't expect to see you here." "Emily," I said, keeping my voice steady. "This is Claire," I continued, extending my hand. Her expression was calm and friendly. "Nice to meet you, Emily." Emily hesitated for a moment before shaking Saleh's hand. "Nice to meet you too. I heard a lot about you." There was an awkward silence before Emily spoke again. "Jake, I'm glad to see you're doing well. Really, I am." "Thank you, Emily," I said, meaning it. "I wish you the best too." As we walked away, Claire slipped her hand into mine. "That wasn't so bad, was it?" "No," I admitted, "it wasn't." Settling back into town was a fresh start for both of us. Claire and I found a cozy house on the outskirts, close enough to nature but still part of the community. We decided to open a small outdoor adventure shop, combining my knowledge of the area and her expertise in archery and wilderness skills. We called it Wild Horizons. The shop quickly became a local favorite. People came for the gear but stayed for the stories and camaraderie. Claire and I hosted weekend hikes, archery lessons, and even survival workshops. Our lives were busy, but it was a good kind of busy. One evening, as we were closing up the shop, Claire turned to me, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "Jake, I have a surprise for you." "Oh, and what might that be?" I asked. "Follow me," she said, taking my hand and leading me to the back room. There, on the wall, was a beautiful wooden plaque with the words Lawson and Saleh's Wild Horizons engraved on it. "I thought it was time to make it official," she said, her smile lighting up the room. I pulled her into my arms, feeling a rush of love and gratitude. "Claire, you've given me more than I ever thought possible. Thank you." We kissed, the promise of our future together filling the air. Life had taken us on a tumultuous journey, but standing there with Claire, I knew that we were exactly where we were meant to be, together. We faced each new day with hope, ready to embrace whatever adventures lay ahead. As summer settled in, life at Wild Horizons was flourishing. Claire and I were thriving, both as business partners and as a couple. Our days were filled with excitement and adventure, but a part of me knew that not everything from the past had been resolved. One sweltering July afternoon, I was organizing gear in the back of the shop when I heard the front door chime. I turned to see Claire's face go pale. Standing in the doorway was Trevor Willis. "Jake Lawson," he said with a smug grin, his presence instantly filling the room with tension. "We need to talk." Claire's hand found mine, her grip tight. "What are you doing here, Trevor?" she asked. He ignored her, his eyes fixed on me. "Jake, you and I have unfinished business." I stepped forward, trying to keep my voice steady. "Trevor, there's nothing left to say. Whatever happened between you and Emily is in the past." He laughed, a harsh sound that grated on my nerves. "Oh, but it's not, you see. Emily told me everything about your little escapade in the woods. She didn't mention your new girlfriend, though." Claire stood her ground, her eyes blazing. "You need to leave, Trevor." He looked at her, a cruel smile playing on his lips. "Or what? You'll shoot me with your little bow and arrow?" Before I could react, Claire stepped forward, her voice cold and firm. "I might just do that if you don't leave." Trevor's smile faltered, but he quickly recovered. All right, I'll go, but Jake, don't think for a second that this is over." As he turned and walked out, I felt a mix of relief and anger. Claire turned to me, concern in her eyes. "Jake, are you okay?" I nodded, though my heart was still racing. "Yeah, I'm fine. I just didn't expect to see him again." The rest of the day passed in a blur, the encounter with Trevor casting a shadow over everything. That evening, Claire and I sat on our porch, the cool breeze a welcome relief from the day's heat. "Jake, what are we going to do about Trevor?" Claire asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I sighed, running a hand through my hair. "I don't know, Claire, but I'm not going to let him ruin what we've built." Just as I finished speaking, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. I opened it and felt my blood run cold. "I told you this wasn't over. Meet me at the old cabin tomorrow at noon, alone." Claire saw the message and her face paled. Jake, you can't go. It's a trap? I took her hand, squeezing it gently. I have to, CLA. I need to put an end to this once and for all. The next day, I drove to the cabin with a sense of dread gnawing at me. The familiar sight of the bungalow brought back memories, both good and bad, as I stepped out of the truck. I saw Trevor leaning against a tree, a smug look on his face. Glad you could make it, he said, pushing off the tree and walking towards me. What do you want, Trevor? I asked, my voice steady despite the fear churning inside me. He laughed, a bitter sound. I want you to know that you can't just walk away from this. You've humiliated me, and I'm not going to let you get away with it. Before I could respond, he lunged at me, his fist connecting with my jaw. I staggered back, pain exploding in my head, but I wasn't going to let him win. I fought back, my fists flying, fueled by months of pent-up anger and frustration. The fight was brutal, both of us exchanging blows until we were both bleeding and exhausted. Finally, I managed to pin Trevor to the ground, my fist raised. Stop! CLA's voice cut through the chaos, and I turned to see her standing a few feet away, a crossbow in her hands, aimed at Trevor. CL, what are you doing here? I asked, my voice shaking. She didn't lower the crossbow, her eyes locked on Trevor. I couldn't let you do this alone, she said. Trevor laughed, a desperate, wild sound. You think this is over? You think you won? CLA's grip tightened on the crossbow. Leave us alone, Trevor. This is your last warning. He stared at her, his eyes filled with hate. This isn't over, he spat, but he stopped struggling. I slowly got off him, my body aching from the fight. CLA kept the crossbow trained on him as he got up and backed away, then disappeared into the woods. I turned to CLA, my heart pounding. CLA, thank you. I couldn't have done this without you. She finally lowered the crossbow, her eyes softening as she looked at me. We're in this together, Jake. Always. We drove back to town, the adrenaline slowly fading. That night, as we lay in bed, I realized just how much Claire meant to me. She was my rock, my partner, my love. Jake, she whispered, her head resting on my chest. We're safe now, right? I kissed the top of her head, holding her close. Yes, CLA, we're safe. And we're going to be okay. With Claire by my side, I knew we could face anything. The past was behind us, and the future was ours to build together. The days following our confrontation with Trevor were filled with an uneasy peace. We hoped he would leave us alone, but there was always a shadow of doubt. Claire and I focused on our business and each other, trying to rebuild the sense of security that Trevor had shattered. One evening, as we were closing up the shop, Claire came to me with a serious look on her face. Jake, we need to talk, she said, her voice steady but tinged with concern. What's on your mind? I asked, pulling her close. I've been thinking, she began, taking a deep breath. Maybe we should consider moving away, starting fresh somewhere new. I looked at her, seeing the worry in her eyes. Do you really think that's necessary? I asked. She nodded, her expression resolute. Yes, Jake. I don't trust Trevor to stay away. We need a clean break, a new beginning. Her words hit home, and I realized she was right. The past had too many shadows, and the threat of Trevor was always lurking. Okay, I said, my voice firm. Where do we go? Claire smiled, relief washing over her face. I have a place in mind. My family has a house in Cornwall, England. It's isolated, beautiful, and we can start over there. The idea of leaving everything behind was daunting, but the thought of a new life with Claire was appealing. Let's do it, I said, squeezing her hand. Let's go to Cornwall. We spent the next few weeks preparing for our move. We sold the shop, packed up our belongings, and said goodbye to friends and family. It was bittersweet, but we knew it was the right decision. On a crisp autumn morning, we boarded a plane to England. The flight was long, but we spent it planning our new life together. Claire told me about Cornwall, the house on the cliffs overlooking the sea, and the small village nearby. It sounded like a dream. When we landed, we rented a car and drove through the picturesque countryside. The rolling hills and quaint cottages welcomed us as we approached the house. I felt a sense of excitement and anticipation. The house was everything Claire had described. A charming stone cottage with ivy-covered walls, nestled on the edge of a cliff with a breathtaking view of the ocean. It felt like a haven, a place where we could truly start anew. "This is it," Claire said, her eyes shining with happiness. "Our new home." We spent the next few days settling in, exploring the village, and meeting our new neighbors. The villagers were friendly and welcoming, and I felt a sense of belonging that I hadn't felt in a long time. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sun set over the ocean, Claire turned to me with an expression thoughtful. "Jake, there's something I need to tell you." "What is it?" I asked, taking her hand. "I've been thinking about our new life here," she said, her voice steady. "And I think we should start fresh in every way, including our names." Her suggestion took me by surprise, but as I thought about it, I realized she was right. A new identity would help us leave the past behind completely. "What do you have in mind?" I asked. She smiled, a Miss Shays glint in her eyes. "How about Clinton and Clara Barfield?" I laughed, the sound echoing through the still evening air. Linton and Clara Barfield. It is, with our new identities, we felt the sense of liberation. We were free from the past, free to build a new life together. We embraced our new names and threw ourselves into our new lives with enthusiasm. We opened a small shop in the village, selling outdoor gear and offering guided hikes along the beautiful coastal trails. The villagers quickly warmed to us, and our shop became a popular spot for locals and tourists alike. Life in Cornwall was everything we had hoped for and more. The days were filled with work and adventure, and the evenings were spent in the cozy warmth of our cottage, wrapped in each other's arms. One night, as we lay in bed listening to the sound of the waves crashing against the cliffs, Clara turned to me, her eyes filled with love. "Jake Clinton," she corrected herself with a smile. "I'm so glad we did this. I've never been happier." I kissed her gently, my heart overflowing with gratitude. "Me too, Clara. Me too." As we drifted off to sleep, I knew that no matter what the future held, we would face it together. Our love had survived betrayal, pain, and uncertainty, and it had emerged stronger than ever in our new home with our new identities. We had found peace, happiness, and a love that would last a lifetime. As winter settled over Cornwall, our lives found a steady, peaceful rhythm. Clara, now Clara, and I spent our days working in our shop, exploring the rugged coastline, and enjoying the simple pleasures of our new life. The cold winds and occasional snow only added to the charm of our cliffside cottage, making our evenings by the fireplace even more cozy and intimate. One crisp morning, as I stood on the porch with a cup of coffee, looking out over the frothy waves crashing against the cliffs, I found myself reflecting on the journey that had brought us here. The pain and betrayal of the past seemed distant, like a bad dream that had finally faded away. What mattered now was the present and the future we were building together. Clara stepped out onto the porch, wrapping her arms around my waist and resting her head on my shoulder. "Pinnock, your thoughts?" she asked, her breath warm against my neck. I smiled, turning to kiss her forehead. "Just thinking about how far we've come. It feels like a lifetime ago that we were back in Pennsylvania dealing with all that drama." She nodded, her eyes thoughtful. "We've been through so much, but look at us now. We created something beautiful here." As the days grew longer and spring approached, our shop became busier with the influx of tourists coming to enjoy the beauty of Cornwall. We hired a couple of locals to help with the workload, allowing us to focus more on each other and our personal projects. One afternoon, while sorting through some old boxes in the attic, I stumbled upon a dusty journal. It was one I had kept during the tumultuous time of my separation from Emily. Flipping through the pages, I felt a pain of sadness for the man I had been, so lost, angry, and hurt. Clara found me sitting on the floor, the journal in my hands. "What's that?" she asked, sitting beside me. "It's an old journal," I said, my voice tinged with nostalgia. "I wrote it during the worst of the times with Emily and Trevor." She placed a hand on my arm, her touch gentle and reassuring. "Do you want to share any of it with me?" I hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Yeah, I think I do." We spent the next few hours reading through the journal together. Clara listened intently as I recounted the pain and confusion of that time. Her eyes occasionally welled with tears. When we reached the end, she closed the journal and looked at me with a mixture of compassion and admiration. "You've come so far, Jake," she said softly. "You've grown stronger, and you've found your way back to happiness. I'm so proud of you." Her words touched me deeply, and I pulled her into a tight embrace. "I couldn't have done it without you, Clara. You saved me." She smiled, her eyes sparkling with love. "And you saved me too, Jake. We saved each other." That evening, as we sat by the fireplace, I realized how lucky I was to have found Clara. She had been my rock, my guiding light, and my partner in every sense of the word. Our love had withstood the test of time and adversity, and it had emerged stronger and more resilient. As the years passed, we continued to build our life in Cornwall. Our shop flourished, and we became an integral part of the community. We made lasting friendships and found joy in the simple things. Sunset walks along the cliffs, cozy dinners with friends, and quiet nights spent gazing at the stars. One summer evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sun dip below the horizon, Clara turned to me, her eyes filled with a familiar twinkle. "Jake, there's something I've been wanting to ask you," she said. "What is it?" I asked, intrigued. "How would you feel about starting a family?" she asked, her voice tinged with both excitement and nervousness. I looked at her, my heart swelling with love and hope. "I think it's a wonderful idea, Clara. I can't imagine a better place to raise a family than here, with you." Tears of joy filled her eyes as she hugged me tightly. "I love you, Jake, more than words can express." "I love you too, Clara, always." With Clara by my side, I knew that our future was bright. We had faced the storms of life and had come out the other side stronger and more united than ever. Together, we would build a beautiful life filled with love, laughter, and endless possibilities. As we looked out over the vast expanse of the ocean, the horizon seemed to stretch endlessly before us, a testament to the boundless potential of our love. In that moment, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, we would face them together, hand in hand, forever.